Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to our buddy read of Mr. Scarborough's Family by Anthony Trollope. This is a novel in which the main character, the eponymous Mr. Scarborough, decides that the best response he can make to the fact that his eldest son, Montjoy, has racked up unpayable debts that, on Mr. Scarborough's death, will revert the whole of their estate at Treton Park to his creditors, that the best thing Mr. Scarborough can do about that is to declare to the whole world that Montjoy Scarborough is illegitimate, that Mr. Scarborough has known all along that he is illegitimate, and that therefore he had no legal right to raise any debts against the inheriting of the property because he's not going to inherit. The property is going to go to Mr. Scarborough's second son, now his first son by law, Augustus Scarborough, who owes nobody anything. It's a neat way to thwart Montjoy Scarborough's creditors by a sick and dying man. Mr. Scarborough does not expect to suffer any kind of long-term opprobrium by the hands of the world because he doesn't expect to be around. And this drama affects everybody, of course. It has outgoing ripples, but there are two outgoing ripples that concern us. One is that Captain Scarborough goes to a young woman, his first cousin, Florence Montjoy, in order to put his case, in order to maybe shade the narrative so that she is on his side, and also in order to tell her that he doesn't believe a word of what his father has said about his own inheritance. And in the course of that interview, she reveals, without naming anybody, that she's in love with someone other than him. They've been more or less unofficially intended for each other their whole lives, and that has never been Florence's intention. And now it's definitely not, because she loves someone else. Captain Scarborough at the time is outraged and says, well, I think I know who you're talking about, and if he gets between us, I'll kill him. And that someone is a boyhood friend, a long-term friend of both Montjoy Scarborough and Augustus Scarborough, a young man named Harry Annesley, who has a very handsome face but a little bit of a weak lip, bespeaking a kind of indecision, maybe in his makeup. And no sooner does that scene happen than late at night, one night in London, in a side street off of two main streets, Captain Scarborough and Harry Annesley meet each other. Both have been drinking, and Captain Scarborough attacks Harry Annesley and is knocked to the ground, apparently unconscious. Harry leaves him there. But the next day, he's gone. Captain Scarborough is gone, and no one in London knows where he is. And days follow, and then weeks follow, and there's still no sign of him at all. And Harry Annesley had a chance to go to Scotland Yard and say, well, I think I was probably the last person to see him. I knocked him down, sure, because he attacked me, but that's all I know. He doesn't do that. Probably because at first he thinks, well, what? There's no serious thing here. I knocked him down, sure, but I didn't kill him. And then later, probably he doesn't do it because he realizes what an incredible legal pickle that would put him in. He'd be ruining his own life to do it. It's still the right thing to do, but he doesn't do it. And he can't resist asking all around about what does anybody know about the Captain Scarborough, and looking at all the newspapers. And Augustus Scarborough, who's a friend of his, invites him to supper and outright asks him, when was the last time you saw my brother Montjoy? And Harry Annesley lies. He picks a time well before the last time that he actually did see him, when he laid hands on him. But he can't live with the lie forever, and he goes to Florence Montjoy and confesses to her. He doesn't enjoin her to any kind of secrecy. He just can't live with this thing on his mind. He doesn't tell his own father, and he doesn't really trust Augustus Scarborough, even though they're outwardly friends. When he visits Augustus Scarborough for a late summer supper, Augustus invites him down to Treton Park when the weather turns, and he agrees. And we see in the chapters that we're reading now, this 3-act play here, we see Harry at Treton Park, down there shooting the partridges and meeting with old Mr. Scarborough, who is pretty ill. And that brings us to chapter 8, which is titled Harry Annesley Takes a Walk. He doesn't take a walk alone. He walks with Augustus Scarborough, and there's some fairly tense moments. So let's read chapter 8 together. The setup here, in case you're joining us late here, is that the previous chapter, Augustus and a hanger-on friend of his and Harry Annesley are at supper at Treton Park when Augustus decides to go up to see his father, who's too sick to come to the table. And he's gone for hours instead of minutes, which betokens something bad, but we don't learn what it is until this chapter, until now. "There was the deuce to pay with my father last night after I went to him," said Scarborough to Harry next morning. "He now and then suffers agonies of pain, and it is the most difficult thing in the world to get him right again. But anything equal to his courage I never met before." "How is he this morning?" asked Harry. "Very weak, and unable to exert himself, but I cannot say that he is otherwise much the worse. You won't see him this morning, but tomorrow you will, or the next day. Don't you be shy about going to him when he sends for you. He likes to show the world that he can bear his suffering with a light heart, and is ready to die tomorrow without a pang or regret. Who was the fellow who sent for a fellow to let him see how a Christian could die? I can fancy my father doing the same thing, only there would be nothing about Christianity in the message. He will bid you come and see a pagan depart in peace, and would be very unhappy if he thought that your dinner would be disturbed by the ceremony. Now come down to breakfast, and we'll go out shooting." For 3 days Harry remained at Treton, and ate and drank and shot and rode always in young Scarborough's company. During this time he did not see the old Squire, and understood from Miss Scarborough's absence that he was still suffering from his late attack. Miss Scarborough is the old Squire's sister, who's taking care of him. The visit was to be prolonged for one other day, and he was told that on that day the Squire would send for him. "I'm sick of these eternal partridges," said Augustus. "No man should ever shoot partridges 2 days running." No man should ever shoot partridges. Period. Jones can go out by himself. That's Septimus Jones. That's the hanger-on. He won't have to tip the gamekeeper any more for an additional day, and so it will be all gain to him. You'll see my father in the afternoon after lunch, and we will go and take a walk now." Harry started for his walk, and his companion immediately began again about the property. "I'm beginning to think," said he, "that it's nearly all up with the governor." It's a heartless way he talks about his dying father. "These attacks come upon him worse and worse, and always leave him absolutely prostrate. Then he will do nothing to prevent them. To assure himself a week of life, he will not endure an hour of discomfort. It is plucky, you know." "He is in all respects as brave a man as I have known," said Harry. "He sets God and man at absolute defiance, and always does it with the most profound courtesy. He was very much troubled about you yesterday." "What has he to say of me?" "Nothing in the least uncivil, but he has an idea in his head which nothing on earth will put out of it, and in which, but for your own word, I should be inclined to agree." Harry, when this was said, stood still upon the mountainside, and looked full into his companion's face. He felt at the moment the idea that some reference to Mountjoy Scarborough and his disappearance. They were together on the heathy, unenclosed ground of Cannock's Chase, and had already walked some 10 or 12 miles. "He thinks you know where Mountjoy is." So Augustus Scarborough is telling him, "My father has this fixed idea, that you know where Mountjoy Scarborough is, and I would have that idea too, except you've told me flat out that you don't know where he is. You have no knowledge of him." "Why should I know?" "Or at any rate that you have seen him since any of us. He professes not to care a straw for Mountjoy or his whereabouts, and declares himself under obligation to those who have contrived his departure. Nevertheless, he is curious." "What have I to do with Mountjoy Scarborough?" "That's just the question. What have you to do with him?" "He suggests that there have been words between you as to Florence, which have caused Mountjoy to vanish. I don't profess to explain anything beyond that, nor indeed do I profess to agree with my father. But the odd thing is that Prodgers, the policeman, has the same thing running through his head." Prodgers naturally also suspects Harry, and well he should. Harry's made himself suspicious. "Because I've shown some anxiety about your brother in Scotland Yard?" "No doubt. Prodgers said that you've shown more anxiety than was to be expected from a mere acquaintance. I quite acknowledge that Prodgers is as thick-headed an idiot as you will catch on all of a summer's day, but that's his opinion. For myself, I know your word too well to doubt it." Harry walked on in silence, thinking, or trying to think, what, at the spur of the moment, he had better do. He was minded to speak out the whole truth, and declare to himself that it was nothing to him what Augustus Scarborough might think or say. And there was present to him a feeling that his companion was dealing unfairly with him, was endeavoring in some way to trap him and lead him into a difficulty. Harry is a willful, impetuous young man, like Trollope always likes to write, but he has never lost a suspicion about Augustus Scarborough. He just doesn't trust him. As well he shouldn't. But he had made up his mind, as it were, not to know anything of Montjoy Scarborough, and to let those 5 minutes in the street be as though they had never been. It comes down to those 5 minutes when they fought, and Harry struck Montjoy Scarborough to the ground. It's those 5 minutes. He'd give anything to take them back. He wishes they hadn't happened. He had been brutally attacked, and had thought it best to say nothing on the subject. He would not allow his secret, such as it was, to be wormed out of him. Scarborough was endeavouring to extort from him that which he resolved to conceal, and he determined at last he would not become a puppet in his hands. "I don't see why you should care a straw about it," said Scarborough. "Nor do I. At any rate, you repeat your denial. It will be well that I should let my father know that he is mistaken, and also that ass Prodgers. Of course, with my father it is sheer curiosity. Indeed, if he thought that you were keeping Montjoy under lock and key, he would only admire your dexterity in so preserving him. Any bold line of action that is contrary to the law recommends itself to his approbation. But Prodgers has a lurking idea that he should like to arrest you." "What for?" "Simply because he thinks you know something that he doesn't know. As he's a detective, that, in his mind, is quite enough for arresting any man. I may as well give him my assurance, then, that he is mistaken. I want to point out here, just a brief point, not meaning to spoil anything, that it would not be against the law for someone to have taken up Montjoy Scarborough from the pavement and hidden him under lock and key. That would not be illegal. Why should your assurance go for more than mine? Give him nothing of the kind." "I may give him at any rate my assurance that I believe your word." "Well, if you do believe it, if you believe it, you can say so. But you repeat your assertion that you saw nothing of Montjoy just before his disappearance. This is an amount of cross-questioning which I do not take in good part, and to which I will not submit." Here Scarborough affected to laugh loudly. "I know nothing of your brother, and care almost as little. He has professed to admire a young lady to whom I am not indifferent, and has, I believe, expressed a wish to make her his wife. He is also her cousin, and the lady in question has no doubt been much interested in him. It is natural she should be so." "Quite natural, seeing that she has been engaged to him for 12 months. Of that I know nothing." "Harry's not willing to admit to the engagement, since Florence is not willing to admit to it." "Of that I know nothing, but my interest about your brother has been because of her. You can explain all this to your brother about your brother if you please, or can let it alone. But for myself, I decline to answer any more questions. If Prodgers thinks he can arrest me, then let him come and try." "The idea of you flying into a passion because I have endeavored to explain it all to you. At any rate, I have your absolute denial, and that will enable me to deal with both my father and with Prodgers." Augustus Scarborough trying to act all innocent. Doesn't really work, does it? To this, Harry made no answer, and the two young men walked back to Treton together without any more words between them. When Harry had been at the house for about half an hour and already eaten his lunch somewhat sulkily, a message came to him from Miss Scarborough requiring his presence. He went to her and was told by her that Mr. Scarborough would now see him. He was aware that Mr. Scarborough never saw Septimus Jones. That's the hanger-on, remember. He's a guest in the house. He's never asked to see Mr. Scarborough alone. And that this was something peculiar in the sending of this message. Why should the man who was supposed to have but a few weeks to live be so anxious to see one who was comparatively a stranger to him? "I am so glad you have come in before dinner, Mr. Ainsley, because my brother is anxious to see you, and I'm afraid you'll go in too early in the morning." I'm afraid you'll go too early in the morning, meaning her brother wants to see this guy, but Harry's leaving the next day. His departure might be too early. Then he followed her, and again found Mr. Scarborough on a couch in the same room to which he had been first introduced. "I've had a sharp bout of it since I saw you," said the sick man. "So we heard, sir. There is no saying how many, or rather how few, bouts of this kind it will take to polish me off. But I think I am entitled to some little respite now. The apothecary from Treton has been here this morning, and I believe has done just as much good as Sir William Broderick." That is, Sir William Broderick is the hugely expensive, prestigious doctor from London. "His charge will be 10 shillings, while Sir William demanded 300 pounds. But it would be mean to go out with no one but the Treton apothecary to look after one. Keep in mind, what we're talking about here is almost certainly laudanum, or a painkiller of some kind. Neither Sir William Broderick nor the Treton apothecary has any ability to actually treat whatever's wrong with Mr. Scarborough. It's almost certainly just a painkiller. Which means that, yeah, you are being egregiously overcharged, just so the world can say that Sir William Broderick consulted you. I suppose Sir William's knowledge has been of some service. His dexterity with his knife has been of more. So you and Augustus have been quarreling about Montjoy. He's sick in his bed, but he knows everything. Not that I know of. He says so, and I believe his word on such a subject sooner than yours. You are likely to quarrel without knowing it, and he is not. He thinks that you know what has become of Montjoy. So Augustus Scarborough has been to his father, since he and Harry were out on Craddock Chase. Does he? Why should he think so when I have told him that I know nothing? I tell you that I know absolutely nothing. I am ignorant whether he is dead or alive. He is not dead, said the father. I suppose not, but I know nothing about him. Why, your second son? You mean my eldest, according to law, or rather, my only son. Why, Augustus Scarborough, continued Harry Ainsley, should take upon himself to suspect that I know aught of his brother, I cannot say. He has some cock-and-bull story about a policeman whom he professes to believe to be ignorant of his own business. This policeman, he says, is anxious to arrest me. To make you give evidence before a magistrate, said the squire. He did not dare to tell me that he suspected me himself. There, I knew you had quarreled. Interesting bit about arresting Harry to make him give evidence before a magistrate. That's very particular. Does that come from Augustus? Is that what Prodgers has told Augustus Scarborough that he wants Harry for? And Augustus has told his father? Or is there any chance that Prodgers has talked with Mr. Scarborough? Maybe when they were raising the fund of extra money to go looking for the captain. Anyway, he did not dare to tell me that he suspected me himself. There, I knew you had quarreled. I deny it altogether. I have not quarreled with Augustus Scarborough. He is welcome to his suspicion if he chooses to entertain them. I should have liked him better if he had not brought me down to Treton so as to extract from me whatever he can. I shall be more guarded in the future in speaking of Montjoy Scarborough. That would be nice. Better late than never. Shouldn't speak of him at all. If you're not going to confess, you shouldn't speak of him at all. But to you I give my positive assurance, which I knew no doubt you will believe, that I know nothing respecting him. An honest indignation gleamed in his eyes as he spoke, but still there were signs of that vacillation about his mouth, which Florence had been able to read, but not to interpret. Again with the weak mouth. It's giving him away, left, right, and center. Yes, said the squire after a pause, I believe you. You haven't that kind of ingenuity which enables a man to tell a lie and stick to it. I have. It's a very great gift if a man is enabled to restrain his appetite for lying. Harry could only smile while he heard the squire's confession. Well, he should smile. He's been holding to a lie. He's just told a lie. He's sticking to it. The squire's wrong. He does have the temperament to do it. Only think how I have lied about Montjoy, and how successful my lies might have been, but for his own folly. Keep in mind, Mr. Scarborough is saying, I lied about Montjoy Scarborough. I lied to the world and told the world that he was my legitimate heir. And if he hadn't gambled everything away, I would have stuck with that lie to the end. I would have burned the papers that proved otherwise. He's blaming Montjoy for all of this. People do judge you a little harshly now, said Harry. What's the odds? I care nothing for their judgment. I endeavored to do justice by my own child, and very nearly did it. I was very nearly successful in rectifying the gross injustice of the world. Why should a little delay in a ceremony in which he had no voice have robbed him of his possessions? I determined that he should have Treton, and I determined also to make it up to Augustus by denying myself the use of my own wealth. Things have gone wrongly, not by my own folly. I could not prevent the mad career which Montjoy has run. But do you think that I am ashamed because the world knows what I have done? Do you suppose that my deathbed will be embittered by the remembrance that I have been a liar? Not in the least. I've done the best I could for my 2 sons, and in doing it have denied myself many advantages. How many men would have spent his money on himself, thinking nothing of his boys, and then have gone to his grave with all the dignity of a steady Christian father? Of the 2 men, I prefer myself. I know that I have been a liar. His point is, he was going to give the property to Montjoy, who is not legitimate, but he was going to save a large sum of money and lavish it on his second son, so that he also would want for nothing. What was Harry Annesley to say in answer to such addresses as this? There was the man stretched on his bed before him, haggard, unshaven, pale, grisly, with a fire in his eyes but weakness in his voice, bold, defiant, self-satisfied, but not selfish. He had lived through his life with one strong resolution of setting the law at defiance in reference to the distribution of his property, but chiefly because he had thought the law to be unjust. Then, when the accident of his son's extravagance had fallen upon him, he had endeavored to save his second son, and had thought, without the slightest remorse, of the loss which was to fall on the creditors. He had done all this in such a manner that, as far as Harry knew, the law could not touch him, though all the world was aware of his iniquity. And now he lay boasting of what he had done. It was necessary that Harry should say something as he rose from his seat, and he lamely expressed a wish that Mr. Scarborough might quickly recover. "No, my dear fellow," said the squire, "men do not recover when they are brought to such straits as I am in. Nor do I wish it. Were I to live, Augustus would feel the second injustice to be quite intolerable. His mind is lost in amazement at what I have contemplated, and he feels that the matter can only be set right between him and fortune by my dying at once. If he were to understand that I were going to live 10 years longer, I think that he would either commit a murder or lose his senses." "But there is enough for both of you," said Harry. "There is no such word in the language as enough. An estate can have but one owner here. I do not blame him in the least. Why should he desire to spare a father's rights when his father showed himself so willing to sacrifice his? Goodbye, Ainsley. I am very sorry that you are going, for I like to have someone honest to talk to. You are not to suppose that because I have done this thing I am indifferent to what men shall say of me. I wish them to think me good, though I have chosen to run counter to the prejudices of the world." So he does care what the world says. He says that he doesn't, but he does. Anyone would. Then Harry escaped from the room and spent the remaining evening with Augustus Scarborough and Septimus Jones. The conversation was devoted chiefly to the partridges and horses, and was carried on by Septimus with severity towards Harry, and by Scarborough with an extreme civility which was the more galling of the two. Septimus Jones would not be severe to Harry Ainsley. It was a special friend of his host, unless he had a pretty clear green light from the host himself. But it was not a pleasant evening. Harry's visit at Treton Park has not been pleasant. And it's not over yet. We have one more chapter to deal with Treton Park before the action decamps elsewhere. So we'll wrap this up for now, and we'll move on to that chapter next time. So I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.